Hi, welcome back to Reading Between the Lines with Tan. This is episode 5, and I have with me Mr. Sanjay Murthy. It's great to have you, Mr. Murthy.
Yeah, pleasure, Tan. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Mr. Murthy has been within the tech industry from mid-90s, and he doesn't really need an introduction. But for the people that don't know him, Mr. Murthy, why don't you give a brief introduction about yourself?
Yeah, call me Sanjay. You make me feel very old if you use my surname. But
Absolutely.
yeah, so I've been in the marketing industry, yeah, since, as you rightly say, Tan, since the mid 90s. Now, this beard is definitely grey naturally, and I haven't done anything to it. Um, and obviously, I've seen a lot of changes over that time. From yeah, I suppose that combination of how designs are created and how they're then digitally communicated, if you like. So, back in the mid 90s, we were designing, or our designers were designing everything using Macs, and I'm a Mac fan now because, and I say to people, it's not because it's cool to be a Mac or an Apple user now. It's just that I went through all the pain of what Macs were like in the mid 90s. Therefore, I truly deserve to be an Apple sort of aficionado now. But yeah, they were designing ads and stuff, and this is an analog day. We had to print things out and post, paste them onto bits of card and take them to show clients as boards and all that sort of type of thing. And getting images and brochures and whatever printed, advertising printed, was a laborious process. And there's a thing called ISDN back in those days that was basically took a long time to move any files from one side to the other. It was generally quicker to write it to a disk and drive it to the repro man who would create the films for you. So going back to those days, we had one computer that was for email, and there was a diary next to it, and you had to write down your name in the diary for 15-minute slot to sort of check your emails. And the email address was like 1 2 3 4 5 8 7 8 9 10 at AOL.com or something like that. So it's been through changes, and obviously then I saw what happened. And I think you want to touch on this a bit later around the .com stuff, and then then I guess Web 2, because I've been through that as well in terms of social media. And obviously today we find ourselves in the third, if you like, iteration of the internet with Web 3 and all of the opportunity that it holds. So yeah, my working career has been in the marketing, communications, brand strategy arenas, and it's interesting for me to see how that space has evolved in terms of the technology that's available and the communication sort of methodology that's available to reach the target audience.
Absolutely. So I found this very interesting what you talked about Mac. Before we go ahead, let me ask you a hypothetical question.
Mm,
If we know that Tim Cook's not a fan of Metaverse, but
mm.
if Steve Jobs was alive today, do you think he would go all in on Metaverse?
I think there's a very good chance that you know um, a lot of Apple's direction will include the metaverse. I would have thought, because ultimately I think there's a big difference between those who start companies and those who run companies from a mindset perspective. And I think Steve Jobs is certainly someone who starts companies, and as we saw in that sort of interim period when he got ousted and he set up Pixar, that the board didn't necessarily think he was the right person to run the company, and they brought other people in. Obviously, change of fortune, he came back in again. Johnny Ive, obviously, as a designer, created so many of those products. And obviously, we don't know the what would have happened if Steve had lived the fullness of time. But it is what it is, and they brought in basically accountants to run the company, and it's safe, and it's done with probably what it needs to do. So it probably doesn't need to be as innovative as it could be if it was true to his roots. Which, just if I were to go slightly jump ahead, and we'll probably come back to this as well, is that part of what I do on a day-to-day basis is using mindfulness techniques to work with brands on forgetting the past, focusing on delivering today's revenues, but creating a non-bright, non-linear future. So going back to your question, I think that Apple would see the metaverse as a non-linear future that they don't necessarily need to be involved with, because they're quite happy with what they have now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, do you so sort of thinking from that angle, do you think Facebook then uh, does something that that sort of shapes the metaverse, because they're essentially going all in on metaverse, though they are creating a closed and a centralized metaverse, which a lot of people aren't happy with, because people are like, at least if you have centralized metaverse, at least have an open centralized metaverse, because you're having centralized, but then you're also having a closed metaverse. So do you think Facebook
Yeah.
has an opportunity there?
Look, I think if you're trying to develop, they've called it the metaverse, obviously rebranding the company Meta, etc. But when you've got diminishing revenues, but you see an opportunity to create something that retrieves your market position through the existing platform or newer platforms like Insta or WhatsApp or whatever, then I think you're going to always be seen as being reasonably innovative. But when you're trying to create a whole new dimension, but you're still coming to it from the principles of Web 2, i.e., you own the data, then I think that you've got, you are going to create a virtual world. You're going to create a huge reliance on maybe the Oculus headsets and stuff, but I'm sure it's going to be experiential. I'm sure it's going to be cool, but I don't think it meets the brief of what the metaverse could be, and certainly what Web 3 should be.
Absolutely. So as a person who's grown up in Web 2, and as a person who has
Analog.
vision,
Let's start with
as
analog.
a- as a person who has vision issues, I
Yeah.
I obviously ask this question, and I ask this to most of the people. Do you actually think we are headsets? And this is me looking at a computer that's significantly away, but then I have a screen in front of my eyes for like 8 hours. Do you think that is ever going to take off, or do you think it's more holographic projections that is going to give us the immersiveness? Because if you're going to be working within the metaverse for like 8 hours a day, or even leisure for like 3 or 4 hours a day, it's horrible for your eyesight.
Yeah, I think that the Google Glass project was kind of in that direction as well, wasn't it? But look, I think at the end of the day, we live in a physical world, and I think that the future, I think, of all of this, regardless of a specific answer to your question, is that I think that the overlay of the real life and the virtual worlds are going to be the key, are going to hold the key, right? Because in certain instances, you can't. The metaverse is just a glorification of what you could do in the real world, and if the experience isn't any greater or the benefits aren't more tangible, then what's the point? It's a bit like NFTs to a certain extent. You touched on the sports stuff. Is that when a lot of the football clubs in the UK have used NFTs for whatever reason, and we don't need to go into why they've used them, but there's so much and sort of a lack of understanding in terms of what they are and why they should be used, that they've kind of queered the pitch to a certain extent for other users of it. So I think that at the end of the day, the whole headset thing is the whole benefits around why you use something has got to come first. The technology follows. It's a bit like going back to in my sort of advertising marketing days. Is that I was never a fan of design leading strategy. It's always strategy first, and then you've got a series of outcomes or a series of objectives or series of tactics, that the strategy throws out at you, and then you use the correct media and whatever to be able to achieve those. And I think that's where we sit as far as tech is concerned today.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this, Sanjay. You said that you've been around since 90s, and obviously you've seen dot-com bubble. A lot of people say, and I agree to a certain point, that we are in the middle of a crypto and a Web3 winter, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
what similarities do you see in the events leading up to the recession? What comes after, we'll talk about that, but the build up of dot-com bubble and the build up of this crypto and Web3 bubble, what similarities or what excesses do you sort of see between both those?
The ignorance leads to opportunism, basically. If you remember back in the sort of the late 90s and stuff, as we were approaching what we called Y2K in those days, that there were so many people buying URLs, which are the currency NFT, crypto and URLs, kind of similar in terms of their relative tech spaces. I remember a story about somebody buying 21stcenturyfox.com because they were convinced, because we had so little knowledge in those days, we were convinced that 20th Century Fox would have to own 21st Century Fox to be able to trade in the next century. So there's a lot of that sort of thinking. So lack of ignorance. Someone's got, oh, I'll just sell this person that thing, and then they buy it for a lot of money, thinking they're going to sell it on for a huge profit to the corporate who doesn't want to do anything, with it, and therefore they lost their money. It's a bit like that guy who bought Jack Dorsey's tweet, for 2 point something billion, and I think the value then was $10,000 when he tried to sell it or something. Look, so there are the similarities. I think when you've got something new and you've got something new that's linked with, it's not developed enough, so therefore there's ignorance across. Doesn't matter how well somebody thinks they know something. That we haven't got anywhere near the end of the line with this yet, and so therefore you don't know very much. That's going to lead to opportunism, and that's where I think that's true of also Web2 as well. When social media first came around, it was basically posting. Facebook was Friends United, I think it was called before. It wasn't the same company, but same principle. And so therefore you did it to connect with your friends. And look where we are with social. It's basically another commerce channel. And it's a huge influence and channel in terms of social movements and Arab Spring and all that sort of thing. And so therefore, naturally people progress new things from a commercial perspective first. Opportunism, as I've said before, into something that maybe plays a part in society as a whole, and they're these similarities across, if you want to call .com Web 1 and Web 2 Web 3 as it were. And I think that we're going to see history repeating itself, and I don't think we're going to see a particular change. I don't think there's any learnings from the past because the generations are different. So so I'm 55, and I remember. So obviously, there will be people of my age who are involved in crypto and trying to make money from it, but a lot of the people who will be doing it will be a lot younger because human nature hasn't evolved for a million years anyway. So, or the brain hasn't evolved in a million years, therefore human nature is the same.
How bad do you think it's going to get?
Yeah, I don't think we're only near the bottom yet. I think there's got to be, the problem with it is the lack of regulation around it. If you're talking specifically about Web3 and crypto and it being an alternative sort of finance methodology and stuff like that, I think that we've got to have regulation in place first. Look at DeFi, for example. DeFi is the best thing. I mean, to be honest with you, blockchain was built for DeFi, right? At the end of the day, because the biggest issue we have is if you want to buy a house, for example, theoretically it should be 3 entities involved, or 4 if you've got a mortgage: the buyer, the seller, and the land authority, and that's it. The fact that there's lots of people in the middle making money and adding margin to everything, exactly why blockchain should exist, and that's why DeFi should exist in terms of just smoothing out the process, whether it's a loan or whether it's actually a peer-to-peer payment methodology or whatever. But ultimately, that the answer to your question is because the rules and regulations aren't owned by DAOs or any other sort of decentralized structure. They're owned by existing corporations or existing rule makers, who obviously there's a sense of protectionism that will naturally go on, going back to the previous point about opportunism. Therefore, why would you, in your lifetime, allow for such significant structural change to be made that basically take away your gravy train? So until that changes, we're going to see opportunism, because that needs to change to create a level playing field where blockchain and crypto and becomes the norm, and then therefore structures can be built, and then we're going back to the Web 1, Web 2 worlds where where that actually takes place. Now Web 2 and Web 1 and Web 2 worlds obviously exist on the existing financial system. E-commerce uses banks, right? Whether there's now wallet banks like Starling or or Revolut or whatever, they're still banks, still controlled by the country's financial regulator. So they're using existing structures, and that's why it's reasonably seamless in terms of the way that they work. But I think that when we're talking about such structural change here, then we can problem. And that's probably why we have a Web 2.5 world now, where so that's your Facebook point to a certain extent, isn't it? Is that they're trying to create a Web 3-ish kind of thing, but they're relying on Web 2. Therefore, we get to Web 2.5, and that's going to happen. So I think that until we have regulation, until we have it being the norm to a certain extent, and therefore that means that regulators and governments have got to accept that, whether it's crypto or whether it's blockchain, crypto as a currency, or whether it's a process like DeFi, or whether blockchain runs government process and stuff is yet to be seen. But I think we need some level of not normality, but acceptance around what it is.
Absolutely. If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you. So when I look at society as a whole, last 3 years we've had the global disease of 2020, which we can't name because of YouTube policies. The entire energy issue that we're facing in especially Europe, but across the world as well, the cost of living crisis, everything that is all culminating into one larger aspect. What do you think is going to be the societal impact of the bottom of this crypto and NFT and Web3? Because a lot of boom in the crypto space wasn't on the back of institutional investment. A lot of small mom and pop shops, individuals went into crypto in 2020 during the global disease, right? So when you see that unwinding, because you've been around 2001, where there was a massive societal impact, right? So how do you see the societal impact from this? Just wanted to know your opinion on that.
And societal impact specifically on investing into Web3 assets, is that what you mean?
And crypto as well. Yeah, both of them.
Yeah, include that in that. Look, I think that there's so much there's so little. This goes back to the ignorance and lack of understanding. I think the losers, if we want to use that word, it's probably a better word for it. Those who will come unstuck through this process are probably the sports entities who have taken crypto exchange partners or what NFT partners on board now to sell digital assets, or and I'm not going to name any, but to create fan tokens, or to replace sponsorship revenue that's fallen by the wayside because brands have realized that sponsorship isn't the cheapest way to get your name out there anymore, that sort of thing. So I think because they've taken that money, and they know that the gambling laws in sponsorship are going to change quite soon, especially in the UK, and therefore they've got to fill that gap anyway. Look, so I think they're going to, the losers, to not use that word, are those entities who at a corporate level have taken revenues or embedded themselves contractually or financially with Web3 and crypto companies in its broadest sense. From a consumer level, I think that there's so much fear around it. If you look at it through NFT rates of purchase or whatever, I think in the UK it's 3%. 3% of people in the UK know what an NFT is, and 5.6%. I think it will grow to 5.6% in the next 2 to 3 years. It's something like that. And whereas in the Philippines it's 43% because of play to earn games and things. But they're using it to earn money as opposed to spending money. So I think that if those figures stay as they are, the risk is reduced to a certain extent, because I don't think the average person is going to pump their money into a coin or or take part in an ICO or buy an NFT or whatever. I think it's still limited to a smallish percentage of the population if we're talking about Web3 specifically in crypto, because I think a lot of that adoption of the metaverse side of things is on the Web2 metaverse, so the gaming sites, the Roblox, the the Fortnites, those sort of type of things, which are much more entertainment driven, and therefore the risk is a lot less. Apart from as a parent spending lots of money buying V-Bucks and Robux and things, I think there isn't necessarily going to be that level of impact at a social level, but there will be, I think, at a corporate level.
Absolutely.
Now, sorry, whether then there's a knock-on effect as far as jobs and stuff is probably a continuation of that, but I think that's where it's going to be.
Absolutely. Do you think so? A lot of recessions eat away people's savings. And right now we're seeing that with the whole cost of living crisis, the energy prices, interest rates going up, everything.
Yeah.
If the industry goes down, if crypto rates go down, if metaverse land prices go down, all of that go down, does that then push the people over the edge? Because already we're looking at a lot of um, populace in at least developed economies protesting against the rising prices, right? Some of them which can be controlled and are artificially being increased due to wrong policies, right? So do you see that pushing people over, and then that culminating into something bigger than what we anticipate?
I think that the rise in interest rates to combat inflation, is obviously there to slow the economy down to a certain extent. But obviously in a basic economic sense, it's supposed to encourage savings. And I think that people who have got any disposable are probably going to keep it for the proverbial rainy day, because we can't see what's going to happen in the future, with the cost of living crisis, the energy crisis, etc. So I think I think people are keeping their money in their pockets, and I think also that people who have bought crypto assets and stuff, I think it was whether it's the right time or the wrong time, decide to buy it, they're going to hold on to it. Resale, it'd be interesting to see what the resale value of those is going to be in the short term anyway. But I think that what we will see is a slowdown of investment, a cash flow from the real world to the digital world, because of the crisis, the existential crisis that we face in every day.
Absolutely. So moving on from all that doom, and it's always good to know both sides of the coins. What opportunities do you see coming out of this mess? Because every mess has an opportunity coming out of it. So when you're looking at it, that yes, we're gonna go down, but coming out of that mess is gonna bring about a lot of opportunities. Where do you see those opportunities?
The best time to start a new company is in a recession. It's because you're getting in the cheap and you're going to ride the upside, right? So look, I think that specifically around Web3, crypto, etc., the opportunity is to create real change, and real change from a regulatory perspective, and to understand that pushing back against something just because you don't understand it isn't a solution to creating real change. And I think that the reason we have an energy crisis, whatever on the Russia front, but with how fossil fuels have been produced, and the lack of investment into alternative energy in a lot of parts of the world where it could be done, is purely to protect the profits of corporations and governments, right? And that's why it's there. And this is the outcome of that. So therefore, if protectionism is the cause and the effect is a recession, surely the next iteration of this is going to be around another financial crisis, because the flow of money is controlled, the flow, and maybe data comes into this as well. And therefore, I think the opportunity is to create a new system, this whole new world order maybe, but a new system that is based upon blockchain, because it's going to happen. So you might as be the one, this generation, our generation, my generation maybe, needs to be the one that does it, because ultimately it's going to happen anyway, and you're going to look reasonably foolish if you created a crisis and then you knew the solution was out there, but you did nothing to it because you thought, this whole Einstein thing, isn't it, about definition of madness? and that's what it is. So I think the upside is change. Um, if we're specifically talking about Web3 and the underlying systems of blockchain and crypto and NFTs and dApps and stuff, there's a big there's a lot of noise around NFTs being the future digital identity that we're going to carry around and stuff, and I think for that to become mainstream, I think going back to my marketing head, for me, it's a segmentation of demographics, right? If we're talking to Gen X, Gen Zs and Gen Alphas, then 100%, you're targeting the change at those people, because people for my generation, maybe even the older millennials as well, they've kind of they don't understand it and its benefit. It's seen as being well, we're quite happy with what we've got, sort of type of approach, or there's an understanding that it's beneficial to the next generation down, but just because I don't understand it doesn't mean it's wrong. So I think that change should be targeted at the next generation and give them the opportunity to build a world that they want to live in, not live in a world that we live in or we built.
Absolutely. And as you talk about, you briefly mentioned about the new world order. A lot of people are looking at um, an increasing risk of a bipolar world, one led by United States and the other led by China, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're looking at this bipolar world sitting in 2022, that it may happen in the future, do you think that poses a risk to the sector as a whole, to crypto, to Web3? And if it is, are there any opportunities that arise as an impact of that decoupling between both? Both.
I think we've always lived in a polarized world, regardless of whether there's superpowers or not. Go back to the Cold War, the Russia and the States, in the USSR and the States and stuff, and even before that, back in history, with you know colonization and other bits and pieces around that. So we've always lived in that sort of kind of world. I think that as data has become the key currency of how everyone operates, and has been for the last sort of 10, 15 years, that's what these wars have not been fought. Bad example, or let's use China. These wars and aren't fought with missiles and stuff, but they're fought with data, and bots and infiltration and that sort of type of thing. And I think that if you look at what Web3 is purported to be in terms of decentralization of the web and therefore of data, that in theory reduces the impact of something like that. But again, we live in a real world. We don't live in the matrix in terms of it's all it's robotized and run by computers. So I think that, but I think that, whilst I've said before that I think that the real world digital world overlaying the metaverse is the answer, it is also the barrier to Web3, I think, becoming as mainstream as it could be, because it's going back to your question to some extent, I think the polarization by or otherwise of nations is to do with, obviously, a number of things in terms of internal and external strength and and legacy and all that sort of stuff. We look at what Xi's done with the new parliament and stuff in China. It's basically it's probably not as democratic as it could be, but and so therefore, whilst human nature, and I'll go back to this probably repeatedly, whilst human nature in the brain hasn't changed for a million years, and human nature therefore it is what it is, going back to the basic wants of control, approval, or security, if that is people's operating sort of modus operandi, if you like, then we're going to have a situation where any new technology is going to be controlled by the governments to create the world order that they want. Yeah. Absolutely. So opportunity, yeah, security. That's always the opportunity comes out. I think if you are in security of some way, cyber security or data security or whatever it might well be, then yeah, I would be looking at how you can work with governments and stuff with other governments and big corporate entities in terms of safeguarding them against anything that might happen due to that.
Absolutely. If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you. And coming back to your personal experience. You've lived in
Yeah.
Dubai for 14 years, and you've recently
Hmm.
just moved back to UK.
Mm.
So when I look at your personal background, you wear many hats, you have many experiences, and you have um, a, I'd say a multi um, I'd say you have a multi faceted approach to a lot of things, right? You look at things
Mhm.
from the angle where Dubai looks at things, and you also look at the way that UK look at Web3, right? So when you're sort of comparing how Dubai looks at Web3 versus how UK looks at Web3, what are some differences within the approach, or differences within how both economies, or even creators and developers or VCs see the opportunities on both sides? Because we recently know that Dubai created um, a metaverse ministry. Not only are the ministers regulating metaverse, they are going to operate within the metaverse as well. So when you're looking at that versus when you're looking at UK or Europe as a whole, how do you see changes existing or in future?
I think that Dubai has always um, existed differently to, the rest of the Emirates, B, the rest of the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, and to the rest of the world as well, because it has no legacy to a certain extent in terms of historical legacy. It doesn't have to protect anything or fall back on anything apart from its own cultures and people. And so then it's obviously got, I think it's 144 nationalities or something live there. So it's obviously got a lot of people living there, and it always has to be seen to being attractive to people and investors and businesses that come and live there, because unlike Abu Dhabi and stuff, it has very little oil. It built its whole reputation and revenues around tourism and the financial sector and stuff like that. So it's done very well in that sense. So I think the difference is, if you look at the Web3 crypto world currently, I think it's just tantamount to how Dubai's always operated, be it property, look at Emirates, for example. They took airlines from being fairly shoddy to being absolutely amazing, and then other airlines kind of saw what they were missing and caught up and blah blah. So I think they've always been forward thinking in that sort of sense. I think this is just the next area. I mean, I remember when they were building the expo site up at Dubai Investment Park. That whole area where the Maktoum Airport was going to be like the Silicon Valley of the Middle East. And I think that's become more of a crypto sort of area and stuff, where start encouraging startups and things. And it's such a fertile place for people to be able to have ideas and find people who will help them to develop those ideas and stuff. And which is very different. It's more of that Americans, I think, mentality in terms of I'd rather see you try, and if you fail, you fail. It doesn't really matter. Try again, as opposed to the British mentality of how dare you try, because I'm going to make you fail. And so therefore, I think that comes across in a lot of ways. I know the UK has changed a lot in the last few years, but the fundamental mentality is still pretty much the same. So I think that Dubai's always got that sort of forward thinking. It's a younger culture to a certain extent as well, forward thinking mentality. And a good friend of mine, Amrita, is probably the best NFT artist there. And some of the stuff that she does now, and how quickly she's got herself into some amazing sort of networks and circles and stuff is testament to what the acceptance and adoption of new things in Dubai is.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this question, Sanjay. How do you see governments using NFTs to their advantage?
I think that obviously it's not for everyone, depending on what sort of type of government you are. I think, but the obvious one is identity cards. And and rather than carrying a physical card on your phone, you've got your NFT that carries all of your data and all of your driving license, cards, all that sort of stuff, which you don't have to worry about the data being shared because you own the data. There's a company I think called Unstoppable Domains who sort of leading the way as far as digital ID and stuff is concerned. But I think the question to that then also is, why don't you just have it as a wallet? So as a why do you need an NFT for it? Why can't you just have a single card that has got all of your biometrics and all of your personal data on it. It's a universal card. And I'll just to sort of come to that to some extent. A long time ago, we launched as an agency. We launched affinity credit cards for Premier League clubs, so the Arsenal Football Club one. I think we're talking 2001, 2, something along those lines, and they were hugely successful. And I look at NFTs now, and ultimately, it's the same, unless the benefits are distinctly either the benefits are so different that it's worth doing. For an NFT, that is, or you're targeting a totally different demographic, then why would you do it? And I think that's the answer to the question, is that it makes sense to unify all of your cards and your driving license and all that sort of stuff, your government IDs onto one thing. But why should that thing be an NFT if it wasn't for the data? So if you can legitimately own your data across the system, then it makes sense to do it. But if individually some people own the data, some people don't own their data, some people have got NFTs, some people have got cards, then the system probably doesn't work.
Absolutely, absolutely. Also, when I look at your background, you've spent a lot of time in Dubai working for a sports marketing agency. You've worked in Dubai Jumeirah. You've done a lot of work in Dubai in sort of marketing, right?
Yeah.
How how do you see that sort of playing into Web3 and specifically within Web3? How do you see marketing within Web3 develop? Because that is something that a lot of people are concerned, right? Because that sort of gives instant utility. So if you own a land, instead of trying to create something, would you rather build a digital billboard and lease it out to Google Ads? Or how do you see that developing?
I think that marketing is, probably one of the easiest areas to leverage and to create use cases for the technology, because there's nothing stopping you as a brand. There's nothing stopping you, um, deciding that you're going to create a cohort made up of Gen Z, Gen Alphas, crypto enthusiasts, gamers, for example, and create comms channels and techniques that are targeted just to them. And the way you'd obviously do that is to use the technology and the channels that are relevant. So you'd use Discord as opposed to Facebook, for example. You'd create a metaverse now, be it behind a gated community, a land-based community that are planned, or whether you just did it under your own URL. Because the way that I have segmented it when I talk to our clients and stuff is Web3 is basically the decentralized version of the web, sits on a blockchain, which is the operating system. It obviously spawns out crypto, NFTs, DAOs, dApps, etc., DeFi. But if you don't want to know about running your business on blockchain, don't worry about it for now. The metaverse is the immersive 3D version of the internet that you know. So everything you can do today, you can do tomorrow, just better, and you don't need a headset to do it. And gaming is social media for Gen Z and Gen Alpha. So that's kind of my three segmentation. So therefore, from a marketing perspective, as a brand, you can sit there and go, right, this is obviously it's not, and what I say to brands also is that, you've got basically now a third layer of comms. If you want to talk to old gits like me, then you're going to use sort of, traditional media techniques. If you want to talk to millennials, then you're using social media. Now, if you want to talk to the Gen Z and Gen Alphas, you need to be using the metaverse and gaming, especially, as your channel.
So, Sanjay, you said that you also do a lot of brand consulting using mindfulness, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
sort of draws you into Web3. Would you touch a little bit upon that?
Yeah, look, I think that on the first part, when I was doing a lot of work on myself, just using releasing techniques to sort of get rid of blockages and that sort of type of thing, to be able to ultimately fulfill any potential that we all have. When I was working through that, I realized there was a lot of use, I think, for brands to follow that in terms of releasing on the past focusing on the today, so maximizing the revenues through through various techniques around the brand ladder and understanding your customer more, segmenting, using that brand ladder. So in terms of understanding the attributes of your product, the surface problems or surface needs of your customer, the emotional needs, and then fundamentally the psychological needs. And in fact, I wrote after the India-Pakistan match the other day, I wrote on LinkedIn, I wrote a blog. Then if you saw it, they're basically talking about Virat's innings, and I thought that, if I apply that, apply those three principles to what he did and try to understand what had driven him, on a surface level, I thought, we've got a problem here. We need a lot of runs and not many balls. I need to do something, which is the emotional problem, is that I'm going to show the world I've still got it. But from a psychological perspective, I think he deep down he thought, I love my country and my people, and this is my chance to show them what I can do for them. And I think so. If you look at that as three, then now you apply that from a brand perspective. So many brands, we'll start with the surface problem, maybe the emotional problem, but what really is the psychological problem that drives the consumer to buy something. So that's kind of what I do from a strategic perspective. Now the outcomes of that from a brand story and a customer journey and a go-to-market strategy involves, once you've created that level of segmentation, I think that's what I was saying before, is that you've got on a certain level, the boomers and the Gen X and stuff are using more traditional TV methodology. For millennials, you're using social media. And then once you've created your new segment, you're using gaming and the metaverse as comms channels. So for me, the outcome of what a brand wants to do today and tomorrow can obviously uses that technology. So, if we're focusing on creating more revenue today, then I think that's adding gaming specifically and the metaverse to their comms channels and distribution channels and sales channels, because ultimately a brand, you can build a 3D version of your website today and create a much more immersive experience just through your browser, allowing your customer to engage with your brand more. And I think then if you're trying to create sort of a non-linear, brighter future, I think that's where Web3 comes into play, and creating a work stream that changes the way that your company operates. Going back to what you said before about how old I am, which you didn't say specifically, but that's what you meant, is that when we first started the company, the first one, at a dining room table, a telephone, a piece of paper and a pen, and a book called The Yellow Pages, which had all the company's names in, and systematically you dial the numbers and try to get to talk to somebody. Obviously, you see that progression through to where we are today, in terms of how brands can then rebuild. So we had to rebuild, obviously, from pen and paper to using laptops and digital systems and filing and Dropbox, all that sort of stuff. And then obviously in the future, brands are going to build their businesses on the blockchain, but that shouldn't come at the expense of focusing on what's important to build revenues today for them, and also releasing what they tried in the past that hasn't necessarily worked.
Absolutely. And I'm there with you with the progression of using pen and paper versus digital sort of creation, because one of the biggest cybersecurity technique in 2022 is use pen and paper, because
Exactly. Yeah.
because that you can't hack a pen and paper. So
No.
a lot of cybersecurity people actually advise people just use pen and paper.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm a pen and paper merchant, I've got to tell you. Yeah. Write everything
absolutely.
down on a pad. Yeah.
Likewise. If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you. So
Mm.
let me also draw up on your experience, right? So you said that you consulted for a sports venture capital firm, and you helped set up their marketing agency and everything with that. So when you're looking at metaverse or web3 from a sports angle, because we know a lot of sports companies have entered metaverse, NFTs and,
Yeah.
and stuff. What are you looking at that is going to shape the future from a sports perspective?
Yes, I think if I understand the question rightly, it's really how is the sports industry going to use this technology beneficially, I suppose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
essentially.
Look, I think that there's three parts to it. One is that in any, you've got, if you look at a typical sport rights holder, you've got three main parts to it. You've got the playing side, you've got the commercial side, you've got let's say the marketing side or the fan engagement side. They're the three sort of areas. So on the playing side, it's maybe better analytics around performance, around if using if each player is an avatar, for sake of example, and afterwards their sort of review of how, obviously from a TV perspective, they can watch how they played, but the avatar could show how muscles are working and strains and all that sort of stuff. So there's potential uses there. I think from the commercial side, that's been the one that's been the most interesting, I think, or certainly the one that's been most prevalent today. Where football clubs, especially in the UK, have taken crypto exchanges on as partners, because they're the ones with the most money, and that's the way that commercial teams in a lot of these clubs operate. Which is, that's what they have to do, and that's what they have to do. There's a guy called Martin Calladine. You should have a look at him. He wrote The Ugly Game, and he does a lot of, on Twitter. He talks a lot about the lack of due diligence that goes on around what crypto partners and stuff that are chosen by certain clubs. So I think that that leads us to the fan engagement part, which is probably the one that's got the most positivity around it, because fan engagement is the holy grail for sports clubs. And with the way that if you look at the way the football, especially, you view it on the TV, it's gone from just highlights really, on a program called Match of the Day in the UK. Now you can watch pretty much every match on Sky or BT or somebody else. And then if you live in other parts of the world, you can watch every single game because of the way the rights work. And the way that's done is that the central authority, the Premier League, will sell their rights to one, digital to an IMG or a Sky or whatever, will then slice and dice it and sell it to different parts of the world. And and it's the same feed. It's just localized commentary, or it's localized studio stuff around it. And that's going to change, in the next few years, because the way the rights are sold is going to change. So I think you'll see a breakup of the rights, and each club will own their own rights and can do what they want, with them. If you look at their Manchester United, I think 80,000 people, I think Old Trafford holds, and every other week, clearly that's the maximum, because obviously home and away and stuff. So, and I think Deloitte's report, there's 650 million United fans around the world. So if Manchester United could build the theatre of dreams as a metaverse, stream their own match, and either side of it have a load of their own content, the players go into a lounge before, like a business class lounge, interact with the fans and all that sort of stuff. You'll sit down and watch the match in this theatre, and afterwards you can do another post-match Q&A, for sake of example. And if you sold a million passes at 50 cents or $1 each around the world, every single day you're making a lot of money, around just that direct engagement. And I think that's where it will go. I think at the moment you've got a couple of aggregators in there who are basically buying the fan engagement rights, if you like, from football clubs and stuff, and other clubs as well, and then basically slicing them up and selling them on to consumers with who have the right, in inverted commas, to vote on this or choose the music before the match or whatever. But ultimately, I think that's quite a short-term thing, because at the end of the day, the clubs are going to know in their own rights, and then they can do what they like, right, in terms of how they want to engage their global fan base. So I think from a sports perspective, the technology can be used to create maybe more insights into how the body works. From a commercial side, it's always the same. And then from a fan engagement perspective, they can use streaming and especially streaming, especially content distribution through the metaverse, using potentially NFTs as your season ticket pass, as the way, but you don't have to do it that way, right? You can just buy a pass normally in inverted commas. So I think, yeah, the carving up of the distribution rights and direct to consumers, the D2C in the sports world is where the metaverse is going to create that scale that creates the revenues that they want, because obviously they've got to then replace the revenues they will have lost without the centralized distribution TV deal.
Absolutely. Right. Let me ask you this question then. You said that you also are working on a metaverse startup of your own.
Oh yeah.
Why don't you tell
Three.
us a little bit about that?
Well, it can be very little because it is top secret. So the brand is called Jamlist. It started off actually as we wanted to create the Etsy of the hospitality industry when we lived in Dubai. For a number of reasons, it didn't work. It went through a bit of an iteration of a high street brand here in the UK, and now we're going to use the metaverse and Web3 to create a new retail experience, and that's all I'm really going to say.
Well, I hope when you launch, you let us know, because I'd
I
love to
will.
experience that and interview you again.
Yeah, no, we'll
But
definitely do that.
let's move on to the final round of our interview, which is rapid fire questions.
Okay.
And this is the most important part of the interview that I like, because I get to see how different people perceive the future as it is,
Okay.
right? Right.
Do it.
One feature of the Web3 that you see shaping the world as we know it.
One, the Web3 is a world as we know it. Well, it's DeFi.
Do you see elections happening in the metaverse?
Elections.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Do you see metaverse being a winner take all, or do you think multiple metaverses can coexist together?
Yeah, I think multiple metaverses will coexist. Because I think that it's if you think of the metaverse as the 3D version of the internet, I think of how many websites there are.
Absolutely. What value do you see metaverse creating that no one else is doing?
Metaverse specifically, I think it's crossing that physical and digital into one thing, but also bringing making making brands more experiential. I think that if you look at retail, for sake of example, if you look at bricks and mortar retail, or the theatre, whatever, is experiential. E-commerce is boring, right? It's just convenience.
Yeah,
So if you combine those two things together, you've clearly got something that's experiential and convenient.
absolutely. Right. Uh, when you look in metaverse,
Mhm.
do you think the future is centralized or decentralized metaverse?
Well, it depends on, I think, what version of the metaverse you're talking. If you're talking about Web2 metaverse, let's say a Roblox or a Fortnite, which they'll say they are metaverses, and I'm not one to argue with them, then they're obviously centralized because there's no they own the data and everything is pointed towards their particular operating system, and there's no interoperability across from using your assets in one game to another game. So I think obviously then you got the Web3 version where that is capable, so therefore by inference it's decentralized. So the answer is
Absolutely.
both.
Absolutely. So, building on that question, if you have two camps, one is your Meta, your Microsoft, your all your big tech, and on the other side you have Upland, you have Decentraland, you have Sandbox, you have Gala Games. Which side do you think is gonna has a better chance of winning the metaverse race?
That's a good question, because actually if you look at the adoption rates of Roblox and Fortnite, they're huge, right? And they live in that first world of Facebook and and the existing social media channels. I'd like to say that Sandbox and stuff is going to win, but I think it's going to take them a lot longer than they think it's going to take them, because the incumbents are so strong.
Okay.
And going back to, and I think also, that we've talked a lot about the lack of understanding of this space, and I think with Amazon, Meta, all those, if they put enough of spin on it, they'll mask the true potential of what the Upland Decentraland sandbox variation is going to be like, and spin it in such a way that they take a slice of the pie that they don't necessarily should have.
Why do you think Sandbox and the likes of Sandbox like Upland
Yeah.
and all are going to win over big tech?
Why do I think?
Yeah.
I think they will, because I think that big tech will stumble over themselves in the box that they're in today. They're very comfortable, right? So the question is, why do we have Web3, and why do we have this movement of the metaverse and stuff? We have it is because of the way that big tech has behaved over data and stuff over the years, right? So if they then just put a fresh spin on the same thing, then it will last for a certain period of time, but they'll I think people will realize it's just let's call it a meta washing for sake of example, right? And I think that then when a credible alternative comes out and has got enough usage and use cases, and people saying, look, you can actually use this for something outside of just playing games. I bought my house with it, I bought a car with it, or I can trace where that piece of meat came from, whatever that might well be. Then I think that's when the usage of it will become more mainstream, and that's when they'll win. So, that sort of tipping point, Malcolm Gladwell type thing. When that and how that's going to come, I don't know, but I think that big tech, because they're going to be outside their comfort zone, will fall over themselves. Because if I were the big tech, I'd just go, look, all right, cool, we've done well. If we want to prove ourselves as being a responsible brand for the tomorrow, so the non-linear future, let's team that as Google. Let's team up with Sandbox or whoever it's going to be. Let's create, and if we have to destroy what we have today to build a better tomorrow, fantastic, because we've done well so far. But whether they think like that, I don't know. Now, if you go to if you look at Amazon and the Yay thing, the Kanye West stuff that's happened in the last couple of days, Adidas, took a long time. I know it's not Web3, but took a long time. It might well be Web3, because their Web3 stuff is, with I think 28 million or whatever they sold of their of the Adidas originals. They've just gone, okay, well, we can't afford to be associated with him anymore because of what he said. So therefore, we're gonna break down that part of our business. But there's huge cost to doing it. People, brand reputation, litigation, all that sort of type of stuff. But they've decided to do it, and let's not get into reasons why or why it took them so long, but they've decided to do it. I think that's the same sort of principle as that. They've done eventually the right thing, and it might well be they see a brighter future selling, in the metaverse and stuff. And they don't need a brand or an artist to be involved with them because of the issues around them. So I think that because big tech aren't willing, let's say, to engage with the new tech, I think that's when they'll fall. That's why they'll fall over.
Absolutely. And let me. So when I look at the whole industry, Web3 or Metaverse, right? If I was to ask you, is the similar to how we saw the mass adoption during 2020 during the whole disease that gripped the entire world, right? Do you think the mass adoption of Metaverse is ahead of us, or has it already happened? And if so, how long or when do you think that is going to happen?
I think it's the same journey that we've just been on the last 20 years, from Y2K to where we are today. I think that if we for want of with the lack of an alternative, let's say, if we go that my description of what the metaverse I believe it to be, which is the 3D immersive version of the internet, is, then it's all ahead of us, because that's the actual development of websites, let's say, or virtual worlds sit on your own URL that give consumers, be it B2B or B2C, a live insight into your business, as opposed to just reading on a flat screen that we have, maybe some videos embedded and stuff that we have in today's version. So, if you look at let's say, if we did this call, this interview in the metaverse, we'd both be sitting, in your lounge on a beach in Barbados somewhere and drinking a cocktail and having a chat, which is obviously possible. It's but at the moment, obviously, we're doing it through a flat screen. So I think that's why it's all ahead of us. But I'm going to turn the question around to you because I want to know why part of your question was, do you think it's behind us?
If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you. So in 2021, we saw massive adoption of NFT technology, right? That's when everyone was buying Bored Apes or any of the other NFTs. There was funny money being thrown on NFTs with simple pictures being sold for millions of dollars, right? And we know how that's sort of ended up today.
Yeah.
But the major way how we see crypto, and crypto's been there for a while, but we didn't see your average person. So I'll give you an example. Even if I go to a remote village in India right now, where the news is printed in Hindi, or they still have physical newspapers, even those journalists today are talking about cryptocurrencies. That's the level of mass adoption that crypto has got post 2020, right? So that level of adoption is where I was coming to you from, because I wanted to understand, when do you see, or what event do you see triggering that mass adoption of Web3 or metaverse?
I think when you can go shopping in the supermarket with your NFT, I think it's got to be at that level. Mass adoption. See, mass adoption. So, and I always try and separate Web3 and metaverse out, as you might have guessed from the way I've answered some of the questions.
Yeah.
I think that Web3 technology around NFTs and stuff is yes. There's a these crypto exchanges have come up very quickly out of nowhere. Yes, there's a lot of talk about how microfinancing, for sake of example, whatever, can benefit from peer-to-peer lending, etc., etc. So there are social benefits, and I think that I certainly separate the metaverse out as this 3D immersive virtual world type thing. So sort of looking at, so I kind of answered my description of the metaverse part of the question. But if you're talking about the NFT, the Web3 part of it, Web3 blockchain is a technology in terms of its adoption is obviously minimal, because I think for it to be mainstream, companies, you've got to replace your operating system effectively with the blockchain, right? So all of your your approval processes, your payment, your relationship with the bank, or your relationship with suppliers, or whatever is all based on the blockchain. So, and I think that once that we get to that level, then we're talking about it being real to a certain extent, as opposed to being a white paper or being a series of white papers or whatever. But I think the point you touched on about farmers, if you go back to India and Africa and stuff, in terms of microfinancing by banks and the telecoms companies and that sort of thing, I think that there's a real use case for it there in terms of being able to provide peer-to-peer lending through the blockchain to these smallholders and stuff to be able to survive. Now, again, whether that's a question is, who's going to build that system, I think. So whose responsibility is it to build that system? Is it the responsibility of a private company who's going to team up with Ether or whatever, Ethereum, and then build it? Is it the job of a society, an agricultural society? Is it a government? Is it a private company? Whose is it? But everyone probably is asking that same question, but I don't think anybody wants to take the leap, because again, why would you at this particular point when it's so uncertain as to what the future holds? And also, is that the real alternative to providing? If you look at the actual need, they need money, and they don't want to go through a laborious process of filling in forms or going to the bank and being embarrassed when they get turned down, or that sort of thing, and be seen by your neighbours as having to go and do it. So is Web3 and our NFTs the solution? The problem's clear. Whether the solution isn't so clear, I don't think.
Absolutely. Also, as we are sort of looking at Web3, and this is an idea that's been bouncing off with a lot of innovators in the space. You're from UK, within Europe, Canada, US, we see a lot of immigration happening, a lot of new immigrants coming to the countries, right? And one of the biggest issues with opponents um, of immigration is that people, new immigrants, don't assimilate in the culture, right? That is one of the biggest issues that people talk about. Do you think metaverse as a platform can then address that in assimilating the people? So for example, if we know that there are certain number of immigrants coming from a certain country, can we not team them up with people from, say, UK or Germany or France or Canada, who can then not only teach them about local culture, but about how to act, say, if you go to a pub, or how do you act if you go to a restaurant, and or what are local etiquettes, or various other things, right? Do you think Web3 is a technology that um, all these people you call Amnesty International, or even the Home Office, or a lot of players, government or otherwise, within the immigration sphere, I think are not looking at Web3 from a very serious perspective, whereas it could sort of help with that per se.
I think there's always. I think that anything that is immersive and you can use rather than flat video, or whether obviously if you've already come to the country it's too late, etc. I think if you can enter the UK, a typical British village for sake of example, and you're still in your home wherever you're going to come from, and you've got a guide that, a village guide that takes you around, shows you how to do things, and you've got tests along the way, because there's obviously going to be language and I think there's some rules and stuff around what you need to know before you can come in or whatever. I think those sort of things are always beneficial. Again, but then the other side of that is the level of it's got to be, for that to work, I think you've got to be able to access it and see it on your mobile phone. And I think it's got to be mobile ready in terms of everything. So the graphics and the interface and all that tough stuff. Because I think the majority of people who maybe are going to be using that service will be looking at it on the phone, and so therefore be useful for that to happen. Now, whether it's a necessity or not, I think is a different question. It's certainly a nice idea in terms of what you can do, and again, going back to that immersive nature or the experienced and immersive nature of how you can use the technology, and it would be it will certainly be a step up from where we are today, and obviously ultimately it's going to be moving over to a new country and stuff anyway. But yeah, look, I don't see any reason why it can't be used. And then if you then take it all above, if you think of it again as layers, if you think of gaming at the top, the metaverse in the middle, and let's say blockchain at the bottom, right? So if you gamified that process, so you're playing the games, you can take part in the local cricket match, for example, and that might add to your sort of local village credibility type thing. The metaverse is obviously the platform of the interaction, but the actual blockchain part of it links into the government's system of deciding who comes in and who doesn't. And so therefore the way you play the game and the better interaction you have with the people and locals in that village gets you more points. So it's real. I think, and that's the key, I think, for me, is the overlay again between it being a nice, cool little thing to linking with a piece of technology, blockchain in this sense, and links in with a piece of enterprise infrastructure that creates tangible outcomes.
Absolutely. And so when I'm looking at, say, drawing on the social justice angle per se, when I'm looking at metaverse, and I know you keep both of those separate, metaverse and Web3,
Mm.
how do you think we can sort of use the technology to sort of help victims in places where they are oppressed by, say, a government, or you see people in Africa who are oppressed by people such as Boko Haram, or other folks similar to that, right? So do you think there are some straightaway use cases of both technologies that can aid um, the population, but also direct victims of such folks? Um,
Yeah, wasn't there something in China? I think in Shanghai where they used NFTs to as a closed group to talk about the situation around the disease and stuff in 2020 because China went kept going into lockdowns. You weren't allowed to say anything, and I think a group used and created an NFT to basically talk about that. So obviously there's cases there. I think that certainly a societal benefit would be education, and I think that gamifying that learning experience, is something that's going to happen. I think that, as a parent, and then we move from telling your kids they can only play games after they've done their homework to actually your homework is the game. So why make education boring? And the education system, hasn't changed since I was a kid, right? As we've established, that's a while ago, and it's just completely out of touch with today's way of learning, what kids want to learn, etc. So for me, gamifying the education process in school as well as extracurricular, right? There's absolutely no reason why you can't gamify careers. If you want to be an air stewardess or an airline pilot or something, and you're basically playing, and Emirates or any of the airlines can have their own games, or the aviation authority can have their own, school online effectively, where you're playing the games and you're building up points. So when you get to actually the point in your age of your life where you're able to do it, you build up so much sort of credibility and actual tangible. Your NFT can be your sort of your card, if you like. You put that card into their system, and they say, okay, fine, straight to the training aircraft, or straight to this, or straight to that, because you've done, so much that you're able to, you can bypass a lot of that sort of basic training process that we would have done ordinarily. For sake of example, pilots are probably not the best one, but something else. There's a story, and I don't know how apocryphal this is, and it is a Web3, but there was a kid who played Tiger Woods golf on a PlayStation, never played golf in his life, went out onto the golf course and shot eight over, or shot 80 or something, but he knew what to do. He just never hit a golf ball in his life. It shows how your brain works in terms of muscle memory and in terms of adaptability and stuff. So I think that's a real process. Now, as to whether it's, I think step by step to a certain extent. I think that provide, and there may be, going back to you said about press, there might be a way of using the metaverse to provide um, um, secure ways out, if you like, for people. I haven't really thought about it much more than that, but possibly that's something that could happen.
Absolutely. And so my final thoughts before we conclude the interview is building on that. Recently, Interpol is using the metaverse to train the folks. U.S. Army is using the metaverse to train new soldiers. One thing from a social justice perspective, that I think metaverse could help a lot is we see a lot of times in US, a lot of the police people are trigger happy, right? So training them with stop signs, or how to deal with people that they stop and search, or things. And training these police officers is an obvious example from a social justice perspective. So with that final thought, I know you have another engagement, but with that, it's been a pleasure, Sanjay, and I'd really like to thank you for joining us on the fifth episode of Reading Between the Lines with Tan. Before we end this, I would just like to leave our viewers with one parting thought. You be the arbiter of truth, the viewers of the Metaverse Street Journal. Thank you, Sanjay. It was a pleasure to have you with
Yeah,
us.
thank you for having me, Sam.
Absolutely. If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you.